Hey folks, I recently managed to get a new 1 to 70 speedrun world record in only 2 hours and 41 minutes by using Chromie Time. This speedrun represents the absolute best time that you can achieve by using my route, and with this video guide, I aim to break down my route into simple, easy to follow steps so that you can use it to quickly level characters for yourself. Also, while I obviously use many fancy experience buffs and consumable items for the purposes of my speedruns, these are not taken into account for the purposes of this leveling guide. These items obviously save a small amount of time, but in practice the route itself is what makes this leveling method so fast. If you're interested in learning more about the items that I prepare for my speedruns, I've made a separate video purely on that topic which is linked in the description below. But with all of that out of the way, let's jump into the guide. Before you can enter Chromie Time and begin following the bulk of this route, you'll first need to reach level 10. How you'll do this will vary heavily depending on the race that you selected. If you're playing an allied race, you'll already begin the game at level 10, so you can skip ahead to the next section of my guide. However, any brand new players watching this video won't be able to create an allied race as their first character, so you'll need to pick one of the standard races and begin at level 1. While every race will be presented with multiple options as their starting zone, I would always recommend choosing Exile's Reach. This zone may not be exceptionally fast, but it was tailor-made by Blizzard to get your characters exactly from levels 1 to 10. Additionally, the zone is extremely linear and tries to teach you basic mechanics of the game as you progress the questline, meaning it's very helpful for new players. It's worth noting that I selected the standard undead starting zone for my world record run, but this is because I did some very strange routing shenanigans that I'm not going to recommend as part of this guide. The advantage of these older zones is that they don't lock you into a fixed path, which is really nice for my speedruns as I can use fancy movement items to break out of the zones early and access some powerful experience buffs sooner than I would normally be able to. However, even when all of this is done perfectly, I'm only saving a few minutes compared to doing the standard path through Exile's Reach. While that time save matters in a speedrun, it's not relevant for the average player, especially considering it'll be drastically slower if you try to do the zones in the intended manner. Lastly, if you're playing a Demon Hunter or a Death Knight, your only option will be to level through your class's starting zones, and this will put you past level 10 by the time you finish. Don't worry though, because my guide has been structured in such a way that you can jump straight into the level 10 section and not lose any time. Once you've managed to reach level 10, you'll first want to do a few quests to acquire a Dalaran Hearthstone. This only takes a few minutes and it'll save a ton of time over the course of the 10 to 70 leveling process. Although the Dalaran Hearthstone was added to the toy box during Dragonflight, you're unable to actually use it on new characters until you've completed the original unlock quests. To kick things off, you'll first need to speak with Chromie and begin the Legion questline. If you're unsure where to find her, head to the Orgrimmar Embassy and look for a gnome sitting on a big hourglass. After receiving the quest The Legion Returns, you should run outside of the Orgrimmar gates and talk to Holgar Stormax. This NPC should have a dialogue option that starts with "I've heard this tale before," and you'll want to select it in order to skip the Broken Shore introduction. If the dialogue option isn't appearing, it means you've never done the Broken Shore scenario on your account. For your first character, you'll still want to complete this scenario, as it only takes about 15 minutes and allows you to skip the entire thing on all future leveling runs. Once you've reached Dalaran, you can turn in the nearby quest to receive your Dalaran Hearthstone. If you already have the toy unlocked on your account, you can just delete the quest reward itself and add the toy to your bars. From here, turn right into the Horde section of the city and take the portal back to Orgrimmar. It's worth noting that the process I just described is technically not needed if you're playing a mage, monk, Volpera, or some combination of the two. Each of these classes and/or race have an ability which completely removes the need for a Dalaran Hearthstone. However, you should still speak with Chromie and select a timeline, as this ensures all zones will scale with your level. I also want to make it absolutely clear that after returning from Dalaran, you do not need to visit Chromie and change your active expansion. Despite the misleading design of the menu, Chromie Time is actually a binary state. It's either fully enabled or fully disabled for your character. The only difference between the various expansions is which breadcrumb quests you get offered, like the aforementioned one for traveling to Dalaran. Also, your active expansion will determine which random dungeons you're allowed to queue for, but beyond that, all of them function exactly the same for the purposes of questing. Lastly, if the Darkmoon Fair happens to be active while you're leveling, this is the ideal time to swing by and grab your 10% experience buff. The fair is active during the first full week of every month, and you can also see when it's up by looking at your in-game calendar. There are many ways to reach the Darkmoon Fair, but the fastest path involves taking the portal to Old Dalaran and receiving a teleport from the Darkmoon Mage standing in the nearby courtyard. From here, you can run down the hill into the fair proper, purchase a carousel ticket from a panda named Katie, and ride the carousel to receive your 10% XP buff. There's a few more niche advantages that the Darkmoon Fair provides for leveling, but they're a bit more complicated, so you should watch my speedrun items video if you want to learn more. Now, you should be ready to start the 10 to 70 route, But before we dive into specifics about the zones and quests, I want to briefly go over a few bits of general advice that apply to the route as a whole. First, I strongly urge you to only follow the listed zones in the route without taking extensive detours. If I don't mention a zone in my guide, it's not because I forgot about it, it's because it's slower than the rest of my route. Also, if you feel that you're not getting enough experience from completing quests, please double check that you've actually enabled Chromie Time, as otherwise your XP gains will eventually be reduced by 90%. You would be surprised at how often people make this exact same mistake. The final general tip that I want to discuss pertains to rare mobs. You'll find many of these while following my leveling route, and it's especially important within any Cataclysm revamped zones such as Silverpine Forest or Hillsbrad Foothills. Each one of these rares gives roughly a quest's worth of experience, so it can be extremely helpful to hunt for them while you're leveling. However, this is not the case for any rares you encounter in Warlords of Draenor zones, as those give a standard amount of experience and aren't worth killing. In order to help you find all of the important rares while leveling, I've created a companion video on my second channel which goes over the location of every single rare, and you can find it linked in the description below. That being said, the zones mentioned in my guide will still be faster than any alternatives even if you don't manage to find a single rare mob. It's a nice little bonus if you happen to encounter one, but you should never sit and wait at a spawn location instead of continuing along the quest path. The first zone you'll be visiting is Silverpine Forest, and to get there quickly from Orgrimmar, you'll first want to take the portal to Silvermoon City, which is found just left to the stairs leading inside of the Orgrimmar portal room. Once inside Silvermoon, you'll need to walk to a small room behind the Blood Elf faction leaders, and up on a pedestal you'll find an object called the Orb of Translocation. Clicking on this orb will teleport you to a zone called Tirisfal Glades. If you open your map, you'll be able to see Silverpine Forest just to the west. Fly towards the quest marked on your map named The War Chief Cometh, which begins the Silverpine questline. From here, as long as you pick up and complete every quest that you encounter, you'll be taken on a fairly linear path throughout the zone. Silverpine is deceptively efficient, as it has lots of unskippable cutscenes early on, which make the questline seem very slow. That said, the last 2/3 of Silverpine have incredible quest density and minimal travel time, so this more than makes up for the slow start. Midway through the questing experience, you'll get sent down to Gilneas. Don't panic, as this is simply an extension of the Silverpine questline. Within the first area, you'll see a giant Edin named Korok the Colossus, and you should kill him in order to receive a hidden quest. From here, continue along the questline in Gilneas until you're returned to Silverpine. Towards the end of the zone, you'll reach the quest Sowing Discord, which tasks you with killing a camp full of elite dwarves. It can be fairly difficult to solo these mobs, as their auto attacks hit extremely hard. If you find yourself struggling with this quest, I'd recommend dragging the mobs over to Lord Godfrey and waiting for him and the other NPCs to whittle the dwarves down. Immediately after completing this quest, you should kill one of the nearby crocodiles as it begins a hidden quest called From the Belly of the Beast. Once you've completed this, it's time to abandon the Silverpine questline and move along to Hillsbrad Foothills. The final 2 quests in Silverpine are full of unskippable roleplay, so they're not worth completing. At some point during this process, you should have reached level 20, and you'll now have the option to enable War Mode. This can only be enabled at Orgrimmar, so you should set your Hearthstone to a nearby location, most likely the Sepulchre, and then use your $1 Hearthstone. From here, you can take the nearby portal to reach Orgrimmar, enable War Mode, and use your regular Hearthstone to return to Silverpine. As previously mentioned, mages or monks can use portals or Zen Pilgrimage, respectively, as a replacement for the Dalaran Hearthstone. Also, in case you're unfamiliar with what exactly War Mode does, this is a buff that grants you roughly 10% additional experience while also permanently flagging your character for PvP. This may sound really scary, but you have to remember that both Silverpine and Hillsbrad are Horde-only zones, so you won't actually encounter a single Alliance player while leveling there. This means that War Mode is effectively a free 10% XP buff for the first 2 zones in my route. When you get to Warlords of Draenor later on, there is a chance that you'll encounter other Alliance players, but the vast majority of people are simply there to level and won't try to fight you. In the worst case scenario, you can always go to a nearby town and disable War Mode later on if you run into someone who really wants to kill you. Now, before we discuss the next zone, Hillsbrad Foothills, I want to take a moment to touch upon dungeon leveling. Over the last few years, I've done a few test runs that completed Burning Crusade dungeons from levels 10 to 20, and I found that it can potentially be faster under specific situations. Since War Mode only applies to outdoor content, and it isn't available until level 20, it's possible to get marginally faster times in TBC dungeons if you queue as a tank and get extremely lucky with the random dungeons that you're offered. In practice, I wouldn't actually recommend running dungeons for Horde players, as on average, it'll be much slower than the questing route. However, if you did really want to try dungeon leveling and want more detail on the subject, I discussed it in a bit more detail in the written version of this guide, which is linked in the description. As previously mentioned, you'll want to leave Silverpine Forest upon reaching the quest on Her Majesty's Secret Service. If you open your map, you can find Hillsbrad Foothills to the east, and you'll start the questline there by picking up Welcome to the Machine. Like before, Hillsbrad is a fairly linear zone, so as long as you pick up and complete every quest you encounter, you'll eventually finish the entire thing. There are only 2 quests in particular that you'll want to avoid. You'll receive stag witches towards the end of the zone, and although it seems fairly simple, the drop rate of its quest item is extremely low, so it's usually not worth completing. There's also a small chain in the east that starts with a haunting in Hillsbrad, but the density here is pretty low, so I'd recommend skipping it. However, you'll still want to complete the other 2 quests nearby, called Extinction and the Durnhold Challenge. It's worth noting that some quests in Hillsbrad, such as Yetimus the Yeti Lord or the Durnhold Challenge, require you to fight elites tuned around a group of 3 or more players. For most classes, these are extremely hard to solo, but it is definitely possible. I'd recommend trying it once if you're confident, but if you can't solo them, just ask for help in general chat. There's usually a few people willing to group for it. Also, when fighting Yetimus, I would recommend dragging him inside of the nearby Yeti Cave, as this allows you to negate his knockback mechanic. The fight will still be very difficult due to the damage of his auto attacks, but at least you won't risk dying of fall damage. Once you've finished everything in Hillsbrad Foothills, you should use your dollar on Hearthstone and return to Orgrimmar. Once there, head over to Chromie and select the Warlords of Draenor timeline. You'll be directed to speak with an NPC called Vanguard Battle Mage, but you should instead talk to the Thrallmar Mage who can be found standing nearby in the bottom floor of the Orgrimmar portal room. Talking to the Thrallmar Mage NPC will cause you to be teleported directly next to Khadgar in the Blasted Lands, allowing you to immediately start the next quest. The Vanguard Battle Mage, despite being the intended NPC, will teleport you much further away from Khadgar. After speaking with Khadgar, you should fully complete the Warlords of Draenor intro scenario. Many people like to skip this area, but it's still one of the fastest questlines in the entire game, so if you skip it, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. Upon reaching the end, you'll be teleported to Frostfire Ridge, and should do the entire questline to set up your garrison. You'll also want to finish the next few quests where you kill ogres, gather supplies, construct a barracks, and rescue Allen Umberhide. After these 4 quests, the zone slows to a crawl, so you should instead fly to Gorgrond and begin the questline there. Gorgrond can be reached by flying directly east from your garrison, and you'll start the questline by speaking with Durotan at the zone's entrance. From here, follow the questline until you establish the town of Beastwatch. At this point, you'll be prompted to choose between the Savage Fight Club or the Lowlands Lumberyard. The Fight Club is significantly better than the Lumberyard, as it gives you access to a ton of extremely efficient quests. Go north and complete the quest A Harsh Reminder in Affliction Ridge. While doing this, round up a wide variety of mobs and pop your Champion's Honor ability. This spell has a hidden effect that drops quest starting items when you kill certain enemies with it active. Under Draenor Exploration, there's an achievement called Prove Your Strength, and this can help you keep track of which items you've collected. You'll want to only use it when you've rounded up a few mobs of at least 2 types in order to maximize your chances at getting quest items. Around this point, you'll receive multiple quest lines, but you should complete everything in Stonewall Arena before continuing onwards. The quests involving Rexxar go on for a while and will lead you further north into the zone. You'll want to use your Champion's Honor ability on the Basilisks and Steam Furies that you'll encounter during the quest On the Mend. Later on, you can use it once again while killing Ogrond during the quest Fair Warning. After you finish the quest Chains of Iron, you should complete the nearby bonus objective Valley of Destruction. Upon returning to Beastwatch, you'll receive a quest named Strike While the Iron is Hot, but this is extremely inefficient and should be ignored. Now that you're finished with the primary questline, you can complete the Miscreant Mire and Razor Bloom bonus objectives, which are just south of Beastwatch. While you're here, make sure you use Champion's Honor on the nearby Wasps and Ravagers. If you have any leftover time on the buff after getting the Wasp and Ravager items, you can try to kill any nearby Orcs and Botany to get their associated quest items in case you're still missing either one. Next, head east and complete the entire Crimson Fen questline. Upon finishing it, return to Beastwatch and hand in all of your remaining quests. You'll now want to leave Gorgrond and travel south to Talador, but you should take a brief detour to complete the Ruins of the First Bastion and Tail Thrasher Basin bonus objectives. Upon finishing everything in Gorgrond, fly south to Talador and construct the arsenal in Vol'jin's Pride. Do not complete any of the quests here, as the main purpose of unlocking the arsenal is to gain access to some really efficient bonus objectives. Complete the bonus objectives Morground Logworks, Zangara, and Aruna's Desolation, in that order. After picking up any nearby treasures, travel further south and complete the Zorkra's Fall bonus objective. From here, head into Spires of Arak and progress through the questline until you reach level 70. Spires of Arak is a peculiar zone, as it has a fairly high quest density early on, but falls off significantly towards the end. When you reach Axfall, you can construct the Hearthfire Tavern, which gives you 20% increased experience within Spires of Arak, as well as a localized Hearthstone ability on a separate cooldown. While this buff is nice to have, it's nowhere near as impactful as many people seem to think it is. By the time you get the 20% XP buff, you've already completed most of the efficient quests in the zone, so it doesn't end up helping you much. After building the tavern, you'll want to pick up the wanted quests from a poster on the wall, as these give great experience and can be usually completed alongside other quests. Now that you've finished leveling in Chromie Time, you'll need to enter War Within zones to level from 70 to 80. I've already fully optimized War Within 70 to 80 leveling with a speedrun of 1 hour and 5 minutes. If you'd like to learn more about how to follow that route, you can click on the video shown on screen or find a link to it in the description. Additionally, if you're interested in leveling an Alliance character from 1 to 70, I've made a separate video on that subject. If you found this video helpful, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe and toss it a like, as that'll help other people find it as well.